and welcome to today's segment of The Power of Money. I'm your host, as always, Michelle Graves, nationally known as the Money Lady, and I remain committed to bringing you the very best in the world of money, including information, including people, and including financial recommendations. So today I am going to be talking to a fascinating woman who is nationally acclaimed as an artist. And I want to get into her world because the world of art is about creativity. And one of the things that you want to learn about in life is how do people begin to challenge their God-gifted talents into specific areas that are not only wonderful for us as viewers, but also fulfilling to the individual. So I have as my guest for this next hour Mary Barr Rhodes, who is, again, a nationally acclaimed artist. She resides in the community of Wyoming, Ohio, where she is now officially a caregiver for her mother. And she'll be sharing her perspective and her story for us today about her life as an artist. And just as a sidebar, for those of you that say, I don't know anything about art, you're going to learn some things that are going to change your world. So, thank you for coming here, Mary Barr Rhodes. I appreciate you so much and your art expression. You are one of those blessings in my life. So where do we begin? Let's start from, what is an artist? When you talk about the world of art as opposed to music, because they consider themselves artists as well. But what do you think defines an artist?
A question that's actually asked by many. Being an artist, to me, it's you can be a visual artist, you can be a performing artist, you could be a musical talent, but it's more than just the performance or just the product. It is truly a lifestyle. But it's more than that. It's a way of being and knowing and appreciating the world, and then being able in turn to translate your interpretation of the world and expressing it in a manner outward to others so that they can appreciate it and see it through your eyes as an artist.
That's interesting. And so you feel that artists see the world a little differently, perhaps, than your regular, normal, ordinary persons?
I do think I think it's the depth of how we look at the world.
Okay.
It's taking the time to really smell the roses and understand that that is a worthwhile reason for slowing your life down and making time for these efforts that as people fly through life so very busy, that it is our gift to them to be able to say, here, we have translated this for you. Take a moment and view this. And it's a creative expression for me, so it's very fulfilling for me. But when someone else views my art and they acknowledge the power within that piece, then it's a dialogue. And I know that in some way, my life and my stepping through life and walking through life has helped another to see. And that's really so important to me, that my work can have that power to communicate with others.
You know what? I think that God is the ultimate artist, because yes. I can come out in the evening and I can watch before my eyes in the sunset with the clouds. It changes. The canvas changes in many seconds.
Absolutely.
And it's absolutely astounding.
It's amazing. I have a friend that's a musician, and sometimes we'll just call each other because we might miss that 10 seconds of that specific magenta in the sky. Or the lavender in the sky. And if we don't take those 10 seconds out of your day, right then, it's gone.
It is gone.
It's gone.
It is gone.
Mhm.
How do people, and I say this because I have loved and appreciated art over the years. Going back to childhood, I was fascinated with how artists saw the world so differently than everyone else, and how they were able, out of their brains, to paint these things and then to produce something that was just incredible on paper or on canvas. And I began to really, I'm not an artist. I have a deep and abiding appreciation for art, and of course I am a huge fan of yours and delighted that you're on the show, because I saw your art and I just fell in love with it. But how is it that some people can look at art and see absolutely nothing, and then others can look at it and say, oh my God, look at that?
Mhm.
What do you think that's about?
Well, that's interesting, because it's really so true. It's the same thing, like I took someone up to see the sunflowers in Yellow Springs
Oh, yes.
last weekend, and
Now that's a huge
it's
little...
8 acres of sunflowers, and it's in the on Tecumseh Land Trust. And I mean, it is a Van Gogh moment.
Looking
You
at all
know-
the sunflowers.
You know immediately why Van Gogh had that infatuation with sunflowers. When you see their brilliance, their yellow, the tipping of the flower,
Mm-hmm.
the strength of their stalks. But 3 of us went, 2 of us really got it and had that moment. And the other person wasn't capable of going there. And I can't define why that person is not capable, but it's the same thing when they walk into the studio. When the piece is finished and it's painted, some people really get it, and there are some people who, you know, I hate to say it, but they just do not have the aesthetic sensibilities to understand it, or it really is about the appreciation of art so that it's worthy in their minds. I believe that, well, just like some people do not understand and appreciate education, some people do not appreciate music, some people do not appreciate a walk in the woods on an autumn day. You know,
Oh,
there's
yeah.
just, you know, people relate to different things. And as an artist, I can't make that happen for them.
Mm-hmm.
I can
Because it's
take
what's
them.
going on the inside.
Right.
It's
It's
something
an
going on
internal.
the inside.
And I have taught art for years, and as a teacher, I think we can facilitate those moments
Okay.
where it might be possible to engage them in that level of aesthetic understanding. But it's something that has to happen within them. And you can take them there on many different levels and talk about, it's really funny, the formal elements play such a role in the understanding of that they have to understand the beauty and richness of color.
Mm-hmm.
They have to understand and feel the tactile nature of texture and how that plays in our world. And if you go there often enough, I think it can be learned.
Mm-hmm.
And but again, it's back to slowing down. It's like you listen to Italian opera.
I love Italian opera.
Yeah, I
I'm
love
not
Italian
trying to be
opera.
facetious.
No,
It makes
I
me
love it.
Just I love
Right.
it. I love it.
And for some that, you know, they just don't, I remember taking my daughters to an Italian opera when we were in New York once, and one of my daughters said, I don't get it. I don't understand a word of this.
Right.
And I said, just sit quietly.
And feel
Be
it.
still. Feel. And that is the beauty of art to me. It's not something that you want to label or define, put words on.
Mm-hmm.
It's about great art should make you have an emotional, physical response.
That's interesting and quite powerful, because I think you're right. I think that art has to move you.
It has to move.
But then creativity in all of its dimensions,
Mm-hmm.
if you are going to have a human experience, should move
Right.
you.
Right.
I mean, we're now moving into autumn as this telecast is being taped,
Mm-hmm.
which is an amazing time of the year as the
Mhm.
foliage changes colors,
Mm-hmm.
and every day it's different.
Right.
And to be able to participate in watching that happen
Mhm.
around you,
Mm-hmm.
to me, is just magical.
It is magical. And I think that connection with nature
Mm-hmm.
is vitally important, critically important to developing the aesthetic sensibilities. When
Well,
you
yeah,
acknowledge
right,
your connection with source through nature,
right.
then all of a sudden that opens up a better awareness, I should say, a greater
Mhm.
awareness to how light plays in other environments, how sound
Mhm.
becomes music, how all of a sudden these things take on lives of their own. The formal
Right.
elements of, texture, color, rhythm, all those things. And then you begin noticing them in other pieces of your life.
Mm-hmm. I think that's very, very, very interesting. I know for myself, and I do have peer associates who cannot relate to art at all.
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter whether it's a portrait or whether it's abstract, or
Mhm, right.
they just can't relate. And I tell them, I said, that's a dimension in your persona that's dead. And my challenge to you is to awaken that so that you can begin to experience the breath of life,
Mhm.
the things that really count and that make it so special. And I remember in reading that one of the things that Adolf Hitler did when he ascended to leadership in Germany
Mhm.
is that he got rid of all the artists, the artwork, and the music, the
Mhm.
things that express the soul of the human.
Yes.
And he said it was worthless.
Well, that's ironic because actually he hoarded all of the art.
He hoarded the art.
He kept all the art. He did not destroy the art, even in France.
Yes.
But he did not want artists expressing themselves because typically artists do think. You have to think
Yes.
to be able to produce art.
Yes.
And he didn't want thinking happening. He wanted to be able to, and it's hard to lead artists because we're stubborn and strong-willed.
Right, right.
And so therefore, if he shut that down, then it's easier to lead when people aren't thinking.
Oh my goodness. Well, art moves a person viscerally. It can.
Yes.
You can go into an environment. One of your pieces of art that is in my office, every morning when I walk in, I'm immediately encompassed by this expression. It just moves me in such a powerful way. And I have to say that I've had some people to say, oh, that's interesting, and walk on. And I say to myself, you are really disconnected.
Mhm.
You don't feel anything, you don't see anything,
Mhm.
but just, oh, that's nice. That is the expression of someone's
Mhm.
innards.
Well, I play a game with people. I did this
Okay.
with students many years ago, and I found out it's fun with adults too.
Yes.
Because there are some people in particular that think abstract art in particular is elite. It's
Abstract
not
art is elite.
elite. And of course, I want to disarm that notion. And the reason I do abstract art, I did realistic art years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and most people can relate better if there's a representational item there. It's a house, it's a face, it's a landscape, because it personally, it gives them something to connect with.
Okay.
Now, my art is more spiritual based and process oriented, and so therefore, there's not a house, there's not a tree, there's not a flower. There may be a hint of something.
Yes.
I'd like to give just a hint so that people can connect with it. But then I step back and I want the person to have that moment where they have to engage with the piece.
That is powerful, where you literally are sucked into that expression.
And they are invited to take part. And so what I do is just take a moment. It's like lying down on the grass when you're a child and looking up at the
Yes.
sky. and playing the game of what do you see in the clouds.
Yes, yes.
I take that moment, they all know that game, they've all done that.
Yes.
And say, take a moment and pretend you're that child lying in the grass and look into my painting.
And what do you see?
And tell me what you see.
Yes.
And they can do that.
Now, how do children respond?
Oh, children love abstract art.
I know they do,
They
because
do.
children are
Oh,
so
yeah.
over
Oh,
the
yeah.
top.
They can see anything and everything
Yes,
in
they
art.
do. They do.
And it's such a shame because creativity is really, really strong in younger children.
Yes.
By the third grade, it's way, way, way down, decreased. And by junior high, in particular for girls, it's almost completely admonished. I mean, girls do not want to be known for their intelligence. You know, math scores go way down.
Yes.
So does creativity.
My goodness.
And so I think it's in particularly important that we invite students, younger people, to come into the galleries and look at the art and feel comfortable doing so. Taking away the idea that it's elite in any way and getting rid of that notion.
I guess I'm kind of troubled as to the notion that art, contemporary art, is elite. I mean, that is just, that's hard to get to. And when we think about children, and children are not elite.
Not at all.
Children are as close to heaven as you're going to get on earth. A 3-year-old child has only been away for 3 years.
That's the hardest part, is to take the viewer back so that they can be open and accepting to that moment. That's
Okay.
the hardest part for an adult.
Is it the vulnerability issue, Mary?
Yeah, I think it is the vulnerability issue.
So
Absolutely.
they feel that as an adult they have to express themselves within predetermined emotional boundaries, perhaps?
And it's like they do not know the art history. They do not know the right terminology. And you know, it's not about that.
Not at all.
It's not about that. But so many people are, you know, are shut down around that. That, oh, I'm not an artist. Well, get rid of that thinking and just open yourself up to the moment of being with the art. And that's what a child can do. They do not have that barrier of knowledge to shut them down.
Well, one of the things that I'm challenged, and maybe you can speak to this, is that when people are, quote, setting up their houses and housekeeping, and they want to go, oh, I need some art on the wall, and they run to the local store, and I won't name names, but the art is mass-produced, it's just there. And I'm amazed because the assumption, let me backtrack, the assumption is that I can't afford the good stuff, good stuff. So I'm going to put this stuff on my wall. What would your response to that be? Because I know you encounter it.
Oh, of course. I run into this all the time. And what that is the viewer, the customer, does not have an appreciation of personal expression. And usually it comes from themselves. They do not appreciate their own expression and their own creativity, so therefore they really do not want to grant that to another.
Wow,
and then,
that's interesting. Okay.
In our society, there's so much emphasis put on money and products and services, and let's just stay with products because we're talking about art, that they want art on the wall because they think it looks prestigious. They want it to match their couch.
Oh, really?
You know,
gosh.
And of course, it's not about the human expression.
Right.
And you can run up to a number of stores, which I won't say, and you can get a piece that, yes, thousands and thousands and millions possibly of prints ago, an artist did touch it.
Right.
But it's so far removed that there's no personal connection to it. It's just a piece hanging on the wall for them.
Right.
That matches their couch.
That is so
There is
sad.
not this personal engagement. When you buy from an artist, you buy a piece of the artist.
That is so true.
It's so true.
Yes.
And in that moment, I always have a special connection with the customers. I don't like that term, who buy the art, because we have an understanding.
Yes.
We know that that person understands where we're coming from.
Well, I must tell you, you know, the first piece of art that I got from you in your studio, and it was just fascinating. Me and my mother, and she loves art, we were entranced and just going from piece to piece to piece. But I zoomed around, and this art spoke to me. It did. It said, "Come here." And I could not get my eyes off that piece of art. And I finally broke away. I'll never forget it. And I just went to it and I looked at it. And I couldn't stop looking at it. And it began to open up. It did. This piece of art began to open up in front of me. And I had to have it. I can't, it was like, oh no, you're leaving here, because I don't know how I cannot have you in my life.
Right.
And I literally fell in love with that piece. Does that happen much with people when they see a piece that you do and they just can't?
It almost always happens.
And you pointed out to me, you said, you're going to get that piece.
Right, because it always happens, because, and I tell people, don't buy art just to match your couch, please. Really buy the art that speaks to you.
Yes.
And you know, I'm in my 50s.
Yes.
My art does not sell for $25 anymore.
No, well.
And I've worked long and hard over these years to get to where I am. And so I know when someone is going to purchase a $1,000, $5,000, $10,000 piece, that they are seriously engaged with that piece.
Yes. Oh, definitely.
And
definitely.
It is such a moment when I come and I have that moment when I realize that someone values and sees the worth in purchasing a piece. That is a sacred moment between us. We know that there is a deeper connection.
There is.
And we are all connected on this earth, each and every one of us, if we're awake to that connection.
That's a critical term.
If
we are awake,
yes,
to that connection.
Absolutely, because my work is about self-expression, but my work is about, in my process, which I can talk about later, it is the connection with my higher being that is expressed on the canvas or on the paper. And it's when the viewer gets that connection, is that when they get that connection is when they want that art. There is that moment when they get that connection. They feel it. They feel it.
And I have other, obviously I have other artists in my home and office, but I am telling you, there is something powerful that takes place when art speaks to you. And there is no way reproductions and inexpensive art can do that.
Yeah,
I don't believe that.
And it's confusing for artists even, because I think artists even get off track in that you can produce giclées.
Okay, well, let's tell our viewers, what is a giclée?
A giclée is a print of the actual canvas or work on paper. And they're reproduced,
yes,
and you can print them, and so you can have hundreds of that piece. And And of course, they sell for a lot less.
Yeah, they do.
And so an artist could make a lot of money by selling clays.
Mm-hmm.
But in a way, you know, you lose that visceral connection to the real piece when it's printed. It's just not quite the same. It's close, don't get me wrong, but it's not the actual mark of the artist.
Well, it gets back to, without sounding too esoteric,
I know.
but art is, music is esoteric.
Yes.
Ballet, singing, all of these expressions of the creative part of man, the spiritual part of man.
It is the spiritual
because that's
part.
coming out of a different dimension.
It is. And
when you listen to, and I share with people, you got to be careful because music is going to impact you. It makes people move.
Absolutely.
I mean, it makes you start. Oh, I love music too.
I love it.
Jazz makes you move. Classical, it makes you move. Watching ballet or even dancing, which is creativity in motion, move something in you, unless there's something wrong with you. And I do tell folks, you're disconnected because that's energy that's coming from that artist.
It is energy.
In the same way as the visual, where you are literally, when you touch that canvas, a piece of you is going onto that canvas that begins to express in that other person's space if they hang that piece up.
Yeah. It's really funny. You said, you know, how music makes you move.
Yeah, it makes you move.
Often, art makes you stop.
Well, art is that aha.
It makes you stop.
Right.
And take that moment. And it's really funny because music is there in a moment, and it moves you for an hour or 3 hours.
Yes.
But art stays.
Right.
And it has to have a presence long after the exhibition comes down. It has to stand on its own.
That is so true, Mary.
And it has to have this spirit that stays with it. But it only happens, that spirit is engaged by the viewer.
Huh. And it impacts, that's why it would impact everyone differently.
Yes.
So what would move me
right
would perhaps not move someone else.
Absolutely. People respond differently to yellow. People respond differently to blue. It can sometimes be as simple as a field of color of red that moves someone. And sometimes allowing less to be more is really a challenge in an artist, to know how far to push it, how far to bring it back, because it is different for different people.
Okay.
And I've learned over the years to just allow. I said I was a process-oriented artist. I use a lot of different medium, and I think it's because I taught school, so I had to teach pencil, I had to teach pastel and watercolor and acrylic, and you know, I had to teach many different mediums. So I think that has translated into my own personal work, because I find out one medium is never sufficient to express what it is I'm really trying to express. It is dimensional, and but it's in that process of and letting go of some of the conscious knowledge. You know, you go to undergrad school and you learn all this. You must do this. You must do this. You must do this. You do this. You do this. You learn value, chiaroscuro. You know, you learn all the techniques.
Right.
And then, after you age and you work for so many years, then you have to let that sink back into the subconscious and just allow it to come out without thinking about it.
How long have you been doing this?
I have been, well, really?
I shouldn't use the term
really,
doing this.
I know, but really, I've
proper.
been creating my entire life.
Since a child?
Absolutely.
Well, let's talk about that.
It's interesting. I grew up on a farm, 43 acres in West Virginia. And I think as a child, I did not have a lot of friends around me. I had kind of lived in the city. I had girlfriends, and we moved to the farm when I was 8.
Okay, so 8
And
years old,
8
you
years old.
became a farm girl.
And the reality is I had ponies and cats and dogs and ducks. And most importantly, I had nature around me.
Mm-hmm.
And so at an early age, I learned the beauty within stillness.
Solitude.
Solitude.
Ah.
And at the time, I don't think I saw this as a gift. You can imagine in junior high and high school, I did not see this as a gift, but it was a gift. It gave me time to learn to express myself. And my brother had started college, and he was going to study art. He went away to the Navy and left all of his art supplies.
Oh my goodness.
And I got, it was what I had available. So I started drawing. And then I used charcoal, and then I used paint. And it all just happened because it's what I had. I used to build boats out of wood, and then I'd paint them,
Fascinating.
It's what I had to create with.
But
I build sculpture out of
was
pine
in
cones.
you, though.
Yes, but I really wonder if I had been in an urban setting, would I have taken the time or had the appreciation of the natural elements to create?
That's interesting. I don't know. I think that when you are experiencing green, as they would say today,
Right.
where you get to see nature at her best
And
as a child.
right, as a child. And I think I've been a transcendentalist my whole life.
Okay.
And
You're in a lot of good company.
yeah. And so I learned to appreciate light at a very early age. And I learned to appreciate the intense green at a very early age. And so therefore I developed some skills. I did not take an art class until I went to college.
You took no art classes
No, in high
until you
school
went-
because I was a cheerleader, so I didn't have time to do both. And it's really interesting because in junior high, I was termed, everybody teased me that I was a bookworm because I
Okay.
would sit and I would write books and draw all the illustrations when everybody else went out to recess and lunch.
Okay.
And I had one other who sometimes would stay in with me. But I learned early also that you were different if you did this type of activity.
Known as a geek today. Yeah.
And, kind of weird,
Yeah, a little different.
So I kind of hid that part of myself in high school. I realized, oh, well, if I want to be popular, I'll go be a cheerleader, which, and it's really funny because I knew that.
Yes.
Well, and in college, I took, art was easy for me. I always drew.
Right.
So you had to take an elective, so I took an art class.
Yes.
And I knew immediately this is where I should be. It was home. It was immediately home. And I just remember I had art professors that talked about poetry, and we always had music playing in the studio.
Yes.
And there were bones. I love bones, and still have skeletons and bones in my life. And it was okay to engage on, and I could spend 3 hours on a drawing, and it was like, wow, it's okay to be who I am.
Now, did your professors
I found myself.
recognize that gift?
Oh yeah, I was
I'm sure
immediate.
they did.
It was such a blessing. The head of the department, June Kilgore, took me under her wing. Well, the first professor, who was my first teacher ever, Carol Demaray. She really, I didn't appreciate it, and she said, you need to appreciate your gift. It was the greatest gift anyone could give me. Because I don't think I really did appreciate it because of that junior high experience.
Right,
I was still trying to kind of shut it down.
Right.
And she said, you need to appreciate your gift.
And
then, as a junior or as a junior, I guess, June Kilgore came into my life, who was the head of the department, and we went to New York time and time again, and I got to walk into. She had studied at Pratt, and so we got to go into contemporary artist studios and meet them one-on-one and talk to them.
Yes.
And it changed my world.
Well, New York is the top
changed
of
my
the
world.
game.
Well,
back
it
then,
was,
yeah.
it was,
Goodness.
and I followed her legacy. It was so important to me. She was part of the Hans Hofmann legacy directly from, her teacher was George McNeil, who had studied directly with Hans Hofmann.
Okay.
And so I got to be part of that legacy, part of that lineage
Yes.
of the abstract expressionist. And
Wow.
that was amazing to me, that I could, by stepping into that, I could be part of that.
Mary, that is amazing.
It was amazing.
I mean, that is to be on that path. I cannot keep but looking at this art because, and I want you to talk about this because, and I hope the cameras can get a good enough glimpse of this piece of art because you brought several pieces, but I'd like for you to talk about this because this is a beautiful, it's a small piece.
Yes, I've just brought 3 small pieces.
Yes,
And all of these pieces, and as I said, I'm process oriented. These are 3 pieces on silk. And I worked
Okay.
with Kitty Oots, who's the fibers instructor at Xavier
Okay,
University. We,
Get a better view of that, yeah.
and this is a shibori technique, a Japanese technique of embellishing the surface of silk. This is on silk. And the silk is wrapped onto the canvas to protect the silk because silk is such a delicate fabric.
It is.
Now, the beauty of silk is that it shows, because of its delicacy, it shows very subtle changes. And it's a beautiful, beautiful fabric to work on. Canvas is very coarse and porous. But this gives a very delicate, and in this instance, this is, I believe, a water piece. It expresses water to me. And
I love this reminds me of little silver carp fish in Japan. That's
right.
beautiful.
And it's funny that you would say that they're often the Eastern aesthetic sensibilities show up in my artwork, and I tried to make that a blending, both Western classical formal training and then blended and balanced with the Eastern expression. So the one thing I want to also point out about this piece is, yes, it's on silk and it's got these beautiful gradations in the back, but the silver metallic bronzing powders are used to bring it up on the surface.
Really?
I use real, authentic, finely granulated silver, copper, and bronze in my work. And it's a very difficult medium to work with because it flattens the surface. So I use it as in multimedia work, and for delicate, it really gives the spiritual, gilded look of the sacredness in that moment. And so in traditional religious art, you see a lot of use of gold.
Yes, yes.
So I took that concept of gilded and brought that gilded concept into abstract work. And so
Interesting.
so that it would have a spiritual connotation almost by any viewer.
It pulls you.
Yeah, almost by any viewer.
I've been looking at that little piece. Now, for a person who's a novice, just trying to get started, and they can't afford the very, very high end, what would something like this normally cost?
I think this is, this being a small piece, I think it's about $175 because it is on the silk, and it is, like I said, a Japanese shibori technique for the water, and then blended and balanced with the silver metallic contemporary.
Yes.
So, and it's really, so you can buy original artwork.
And this is beautiful. I mean, I truly, I love this. I want to talk about these other pieces as well. Let's look at this piece here. This is wonderful too.
This is also a water piece. Now, I have done a series of work called, wonders of the world.
Yes.
And I focused on the elements of fire and air and water and earth. And it's because everything comes from that.
Right.
Everything.
Right.
And sometimes we have to go back. We have to, what I say, return to Eden and come to our primal instincts to be able to relate to life.
Yes.
So this is one of the also pieces from that series of silk over canvas. And this time, again, a similar piece. Let me show you these together.
Okay. All righty,
because this is part of a series. And you can see here that I've used
here, I'll hold that.
different formats. And a format is just the size and scale of the canvas. So it's part of the same series.
Okay.
And I wanted to show that because just how differently something as slight as this has a more turquoise tone and this has a blue tone and the richness of the blue up here. And then to take it and move it from silver into the gold.
That is amazing. That's a gift.
And so
I saw that and it made me think of the creation. It did. It moved me viscerally to think about God speaking light and the fire. That gold made me think in the water and that it just was amazing.
Well, and it is, and that's one of the beauties of the water series is that the metallics they're very warm. They're from the earth.
Okay.
They are ore from the earth, and they are warm.
Okay.
When you mine silver or gold, they are warmth from our inner earth. And that is the tension created between the water and the earth. And one of the things that I always try to do as an artist is to create tension. Great masters knew how to create tension on the canvas. And so that is something I appropriate from the great masters. And so I always try to somehow, like I said, it's in the back of my mind, but it's bringing that tension into the canvas is what,
makes it pop.
Makes it grabs the viewer.
Yes, right, and pulls you inside.
Energetically.
Yes,
is
right.
to, something.
It's something.
You may not understand it, you may not be able to talk about it, but again, you feel it. You feel the tension.
Yes, this is amazing.
So in contrast,
okay, let's look at this one.
This is an earth piece.
Okay.
This is a totally different palette.
Okay.
And totally different use of the silk.
This is silk again.
This is still silk, but see, I didn't use the shibori technique in this one. This is a directly painted piece, and again, moved it to a totally different color palette, different scale, different format, and then allowing some of the subtle details to be seen as elements of our earth. And a viewer might see, that might be a leaf, it might be underground, it's foliage in the autumn, but it invites the viewer again to interpret and see what they want to see. It doesn't close it in so much that, oh, well, that's a leaf. Well, yes, there's some leaf-like shapes in there that it could be a leaf, but it invites the viewer to do their own interpretation. But I think everyone can relate that this is an earth piece.
Okay.
So I've entitled the different shows Water, Wonder of the World, and this is from the Earth, Wonder of the World series.
I see a fish.
Yeah.
I just saw a carp in there. I did. That's amazing.
Yeah. So that's the beauty, is that I try to invite the viewer in.
And you know what? That does require a letting down of the guard.
Yes, it does.
It really does, which you tell a person it's okay to see what you want to see.
Right.
You just have to relax and let it enter in.
And it's really funny because some of the serious art collectors, they still did not understand abstract. And then others, of course, do.
Right.
But it's amazing, the people who collect contemporary abstract, it's usually like all they collect.
Well, actually,
You know.
I will tell you, I have evolved to that now. That is really all I'm interested in. I know
Okay.
that's been a, when I think back on, now I have a couple of pieces that actually show specific activity, but my lure is to be able to let my mind imagine, and that piece will take me into a different place. And it's a wonderful place. It's a magical, it's mystical, it's fascinating, it's childlike.
Yes.
And it's wonder. It's just
Yes.
childlike. You can sit there and you can just look at it. And truthfully, this is why I wanted you on the show, because so many people think that art has to look like one thing or another. And I tell them art is so very personal.
It is.
And you
Should be.
you want original art.
Yes.
I mean, in my kitchen, I have art that has been drawn by children, and they drew on acrylic wine bottles. Yeah, and signed them. And actually, they're very nice.
Yeah.
They're very nice. They're not particularly high end, but the fact is that that child's energy is right there on that canvas. And I like that. I mean, that makes me feel good when I'm in the kitchen.
Right.
But continue to tell me about these fascinating people. So you actually were mentored by two women artists. Now, they
Yes.
were they successful in terms of their own peer
Yes.
recognition?
Well, June in particular was very successful, and she came back and was the head of the department of Marshall University. And people often wondered, why didn't she stay in New York and paint? Because she could have.
Oh, and done very well.
And done very well. She did
Yeah.
very well where she was.
Right.
But the point being is that she had a passion to share this, and she was a teacher. And I will be forever grateful. Now, forever grateful. She passed away a few years ago, and I
so
went
sorry.
for her. I went to her funeral, and I was very blessed that I painted in a group. I was the youngest in the group. They were all older than me. One was 10 years older. There were two that were 20 years older. And I was very blessed to be able to paint with these women. All women, there were 5 of us. And I learned to read books and be part of the Noetic Institute and look deep within myself.
Okay.
And that was grad school. And it was a wonderful gift to me to have these women who, they were strong women. And they were,
Painting
you know,
up
my
a
father,
storm.
and they were my father's age. Some of
Oh
them were
my
my father's
goodness
age.
gracious.
So 37 years older than me.
And painting.
And painting. And they broke a lot of barriers for women in the arts. Because it really wasn't that long ago that, you know, artists were men.
Really?
So,
but as you think
yes.
back, looking through the Picasso and
Right.
Rembrandt, they were all men.
They were all men. So they really broke through a lot of those barriers for me. And now there are many, many female artists.
Yes.
At all different levels in their career. But that, I will be forever thankful to have had that experience with them. And then I was really blessed that the National Endowment of the Arts back in the 80s had money.
Wow.
And I remember those years. And I got to study. Another one that really impacted my career was Robert De Niro. And no, not the actor. This is the artist who is also an abstract expressionist. And I got
Robert
to work
De
with
Niro.
him directly.
My goodness. Okay.
And, you know, again, it was just another person validating who I was. And that I could learn, because abstract expressionists have the knowledge to understand, see, and open up space. You mentioned how this, you could look into it.
Yes.
That is
love this.
one of the you know, talents that an abstract expressionist learns, is to be able to look to open up that space and create that push-pull of the elements without using, you know, a house, a flower, or
Right,
whatever to do
right,
that.
right.
Because there's natural space in the world. Of course, you can paint representation and create that space, but to be able just to do that with the formal elements
That is
of color, texture, and so on.
that is so
So
powerful.
it's a different understanding of space and how that, and so working with Robert De Niro and June Kilgore were truly gifts in my life.
Goodness. Now you went to
Truly.
grad school in this area, or
Marshall University.
Marshall University,
And then I got to study, like I said, through the National Endowment of the Arts with nationally acclaimed artists. And again, it's also the trips to New York,
yes,
to Pratt, and in particular George McNeil's studio, who was June's professor, but who had
Really?
worked directly with Hans Hofmann, to go to his studio, and as, you know, an 18-year-old,
that is amazing.
to see this large warehouse
Yes.
space, and he had a, you know, a forklift, you know, to move his pieces,
I
and
mean,
and the wooden crates,
Yes.
and to have that level of professionalism at that early age was like, wow, this is serious. This is
You know, that's
serious
so-
commitment.
That is so, I have to say that because we were very young women, both of us, when we had our experiences. In my world
Yes.
of money, I, at 17 and 18, I mentored under some of the greatest economists.
Makes all the difference
It
in the world.
changed everything. I had men that were thoughtful thinkers and understood world systems that were there all the time. It was not even a big deal, and they would tell me things and show me things. And I was a sponge. I think young people need that. They need to be encouraged and incentivized
Well,
in that way.
yeah.
That is so powerful, Mary.
It is so powerful, and you know, it helps us to become a part immediately, to walk into that.
Yes.
It helps us to become the professional that we can be just by going along with them. It's very natural,
Right.
and it's part of the flow of life itself.
Right,
And you
right.
don't even hardly know it when you're doing it.
Well, I
You're just
certainly,
being,
you're just,
you know, you're just
a
being.
kid. I mean,
Right.
I don't know about you.
Oh, I was
But I
amazed.
was just a kid. I
Right.
mean, when I think about the men that crossed my paths as a young person, a child, Earl Graves, who was with Black Enterprise, he was just a young man himself, selling newspapers. That,
Right,
and then
right.
Vernon Jordan and Julian Bond and Bill Clinton. These were guys, these were young people.
Right.
And they just considered me a literally, you know, Michelle, you know.
Right.
And I think back and I'm like, whoa, whoa. Look at greatness all around you.
And you know, it was, you know, you just got to be in it.
That's just, you got to be
I
in
know.
it.
And I remember going into Hannah Wilke's studio. She's still a living artist today, but you know, it was she used gum
Gum.
here to create female parts, very intimate female parts, and they were hung on a wall. And I remember, like, wow,
Right, gum.
this is beyond, you know, it just like blows your mind. And it was in a very high-end studio, and you sit there, and I got to talk with her and got an understanding of who she was
Yes.
and why she was creating this art. That's something I could not have ever seen
Not in
anywhere
1,000
else,
years,
to have
Mary.
that personal
Yeah.
conversation with her and realize, wow, she's breaking barriers that I
Who would've-
can't even
yeah.
imagine, the barriers that were being broken through her art expression. And that is, to me, a very important piece of creating art, is to make a statement. I specifically went back to earth and air and fire and the elements because, as you know, part of the Mount Adams Farmers Market, leading a sustainable life and going back to rain barrels and compost, and all that's very important to me.
Back to the earth.
Back to the earth.
To where it all began.
To where it all began. And I think this is my way of expressing the need within our society today to go back, return to Eden.
Well, let me, because time is wrapped up and there's so much more I want to say, but I do want to say this much. I need you to tell the viewers how to reach you if they want to view and purchase your art.
Okay. My gallery is 114 West 4th Street, Bromwell's Gallery.
In Cincinnati.
It's Bromwell's Fireplace, but on the second floor he has furniture and art gallery. And then I have a private studio on the 3rd floor. And it's there are 6 artists altogether in this space. It's a beautiful space, and I'm very fortunate to be there. So you can contact me though. It's just Mary Barr Rhodes at yahoo.com, or you can call me directly at 513-544-9700. You can also view my artwork online at marybarrrhodes.com, or I do have a Facebook, and I have albums on my Facebook account also of different art series and different collections I put together for collectors to view.
So let me kind of summarize to those of you that are watching this fascinating show where I'm interviewing Mary Barr Rhodes, a nationally acclaimed artist with just credentials and an awesome presence and spirit. But you can reach her on Facebook under Mary Barr, B-A-R-R Rhodes, R-H-O-D-E-S. She can also be reached on Yahoo, correct? Under
Mary Barr Rhodes
Mary Barr Rhodes at yahoo.com. You can also Google her and have fun at night, because that's what I did, and looked at all her different expressions and enjoyed myself. And also come to her gallery in Cincinnati, Ohio, at Bromwell's, which is on 4th Street, and she's on the 3rd floor. I want to thank all of you for being a part of this fascinating conversation today. Many of us do not have an exposure to art, but art will take you to another level. And so I'm always encouraging people to embrace change. It's here. This is your opportunity to do things, to experience things you've never done before. And don't be afraid to go to an art gallery or an art exhibit. Don't be afraid or ashamed to say, I don't know, and begin to just experience the feel. Just feel it on the inside, because that's a part of you that God gave you to experience and enjoy, as same as looking at sunrise and enjoying the rain when it patters on your roof. These are all a part of our humanity. And I speak to you as the money lady, because my world is a little bit more than just handling money. It really is. I'm interested in being a full, complete human being, and I encourage you to do the same. So I thank you so much, Ms. Barr Rhodes, Mary, and to my viewers, you have an amazing and incredibly awesome day, and may God bless you. You take care. See you next time.